Hello, so today I will be sharing with you the flower seeds that I will be winter sowing for 2024. If you're not familiar with winter sowing, it is the process of sowing your seeds in a plastic container like a milk jug, and then putting that container outdoors in the elements through the winter, and then letting your seeds germinate naturally. I have a series of videos which shows you how to winter sow, as well as showing you the progress from seed all the way on how to plant the seedlings out in your garden. I am winter sowing in New Jersey Zone 6B. In the past, I was winter sowing a lot of times in January and February, but now I have been pushing it out a little bit later into March. This is because we have been seeing some patterns of weather where it just warms up and then your seedlings end up germinating, which requires you to really kind of be a little bit more hands-on because we get a lot of still freezing nights and some of those seedlings won't survive. So rather than having to do a lot more work, which is not the intent of winter sowing, I have been pushing my winter sowing out a little later if it does not require cold stratification. I'm going to share with you the seeds in the order that I plan on putting them outdoors. So the first batch I plan on winter sowing in middle to late February. The perennials are the ones you do want to get out there a little earlier just because they do need some cold stratification. A lot of them generally need only about maybe 4 weeks of cold stratification. So the first one is the coneflower. And I have this mellow yellow, which I also winter sowed last year. And I had some good success. I have several plants out in my garden, which I expect them to flower this year. But I have a few seeds left, and I'd like to get these to germinate as well. I have found that most of the time for me, the germination rate for coneflowers are typically 50% or less. So hopefully we'll get 1 or 2 plants from these seeds. And the next one is this white coneflower that I purchased this year called White Swan. And I'm really looking forward to this one with the yellow and the white. I think it could look really pretty. And I probably will rehome some of the pink ones I have and replace them with these white ones. So next is Monarda, and I do have some in the garden, but I wanted to try a different variety. So I'll probably be digging up the other ones and replacing them with. Next is yarrow, and I do have some yarrow out in the garden, but again, that particular yarrow is not doing so well. So I do plan on digging that up, maybe rehoming some of it. But this one I want to grow in my enclosed veggie garden area because I do have problems with the rabbits eating it. Next is milkweed, and this does need some cold stratification. Typically, they recommend about 30 days. Some sites recommend 60 days, but I think 30 days should be fine. And I have 2 different types. I have this butterfly milkweed as well as a swamp milkweed that I had purchased last year, but I'll be sowing those this year. Next is feverfew. I have a few in the garden that did perennialize, but I'm not sure how much vigor they're going to have left. And those are more of a double, and I wanted to try out the single. Next is the forget-me-not. And I have never tried this before, so this will be my first time winter sowing these. I hope that these will be rabbit resistant, but I will try to grow them in a couple different areas, some of them possibly where they're more protected versus where they're just out in the open, and that'll be a test for these. But I really, really love the little blue flowers. Next is one that I purchased last year. This is a native mist flower. This does need some cold stratification as well. A lot of natives generally do. I do believe that these are likely rabbit resistant, and we'll be trying this also where I plant them in several different places and seeing how they hold up. Next is poppies. Now these can be direct sown, but I have found, and I've tried to direct sow them, but somehow either they got washed away or something happened, and I don't seem to get any poppies. So I'm going to try some winter sowing for poppies, and then I'm also going to direct sow them again. maybe putting something over them just to protect it from washing away or being eaten. And I hope to have a few poppies this coming year. So next is viola. I grew some last year. They did great in winter sowing, so I want to grow some more. So I have this one, which has a little bit of purple and white. And then this one, which is the antique rose. And I grew this one last year. It's just absolutely beautiful. I love the color on this one. And they did, again, really, really well on winter sowing. So the next are batcher buttons. Now, many people do direct sow these seeds and they have great success with just direct sowing them. But I have found that direct sowing for me many times does not do well. I don't know what happens to the seeds, but I'd rather do winter sowing to ensure that the seeds are protected and that I can actually plant them where I want to once they do germinate. So I have two varieties here. One is the Classic Magic, and then the other one is the Bride. And I'm really, really looking forward to this white batcher button. I think it could look really pretty. So last year I bought some pink dandelion, which I will be winter sowing this year. We'll see how this one goes. I'm sure it'll work well with winter sowing. It's more about the transplanting because dandelions do have a taproot, and a lot of times plants that have taproots don't like their roots to be disturbed, but we'll give it a go, see how it goes. I don't even know where I'm going to put this in the garden, but I'll be growing them this year. And then the last one for my February winter sowing is borage. I did do borage last year, and I don't recall what time I did this. I actually think I sowed these in late March, but I'm going to try them again, and this time I'm going to do them in late February. The seed is pretty large, so I feel like it could take some time for it to actually germinate. And so I'm going to do them a little earlier this year. So my next batch of flower seeds, I plan on winter sowing in early to middle March. So first is Scabiosa. And these are cool flowers, so they do like the cool temperatures. So the first one I have is the Summer Sangria, and then I have some Black Knight. So my tried and true is straw flower. It always does really, really well for me with winter sowing. And so I have several varieties here. So I have the king size orange, king size silvery rose, king size red, and the vintage white. I don't know why, but this year I'm really looking forward to a lot of the white flowers. Next is calendula, which has been a little bit of a hit or miss for me. And my calendula does seem to self-seed in the garden. So I'm hoping that a few of them have self-seeded in my grow bags, but just in case, I'm going to winter sow a few more. So next is azuratum, and this is new for me. So I'm hoping it'll do well with winter sowing. It is a mixed variety and it is an annual. I am also growing the mist flower, which looks a lot like azuratum, but it is a native plant. So I'd like to see how each one does in the garden, but this is not perennial, and I plan on using this more as a cut flower. So the next one is verbena, and this is a new one for me. So I hope it does well with winter sowing, but I am going to do a few with winter sowing, and then I am going to sow some indoors just to be sure I have some in the garden, and then see also which one does well. I would prefer it to do well with winter sowing because I have limited space indoors, and I want to do most of my growing in the winter sowing method. So this is not a flower seed. It is a perennial grass, blue grama. I bought this last year and I meant to winter sow this and I completely forgot to. So I'm going to do that this year. Hopefully this is very successful. I would love to see this in the garden. So one of the ones I have winter sown in the past is Snapdragon, and I am going to try some again this year. Every year I find that while they do germinate, I don't find that they flower very early, and then they don't flower until the fall, and they're not very strong. So I am going to try it once again, but I am going to save some of the seeds to grow them indoors because I'm not so sure that I'm going to continue doing winter sowing for snapdragons. So this next batch, I plan on winter sowing in late March to early April. So the first is Gomphrena, and I did winter sow Gomphrena last year, and I also did it sometime around late March to early April, and they did really well in the garden for me. So I have various different varieties. So the first one is this Buddy Purple, which is very short variety and is going to be great for containers. So I hope to do maybe a fairy garden or two this year, and this will be perfect for that. Then I have the mandarin orange and the strawberry fields. I grew the strawberry fields last year and this was nice, but I didn't like the leaf structure as much, but I am going to grow a few more. And I believe this is the same type of plant. And I grew them in containers. So I am going to grow them in the ground this year and hopefully they'll do a little better in the ground. And then I also have this lavender lady. Now, this is a new one for me, and this is celosia. And I plan on winter sowing these as well as growing them indoors because I don't quite know how they do for winter sowing and if they will flower a little too late for me. This takes 90 to 100 days for it to mature. So that's a very long period. And I do hope to have some earlier rather than later. So we'll see which one does best. And then last but not least is nasturtiums. I did try winter sowing these last year and I did do them kind of late in the year. I am considering whether or not to move these to earlier March on the winter sowing schedule. But anyway, so I love these new varieties that Baker Creek came out with. I've got this tip top rose, which is absolutely stunning, the color. And then I've got this tip top pink blush, which is absolutely beautiful. So one of the flower seeds that I have never winter sown and don't plan to is zinnia seeds. Zinnias do germinate rather quickly. And so with a lot of the fall springs that we tend to have, the temperatures warm up and then the zinnia seeds will germinate, but then we'll get really cold again and then they will die off. So I usually just take zinnia seeds and plant them in a tray once the weather starts warming up right on my deck and then plant them outside. They don't take very long to even flower. So I just don't find that zinnias are a good choice for winter sowing. But if you've had success, you should continue doing what works for you. So share with me, what flower seeds are you planning on winter sowing this year? I would love to know what varieties you've tried that are really successful for you, and what varieties have you tried that generally don't work. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.